Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the June 26, 2018 regular board meeting of the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. By way of attendance, we have all board members present this evening with the exception of Mr. Earnshaw. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, I turn it over to Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Ms. President. This evening, just as an item of clarification, this evening our solicitor, Jack Dooley, is filling in for Eric Fry. He's seated to my right. As regards to recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Helm. Mr. Helm comes this evening to recognize some students and to share with the board and our community some of the great achievements as part of the science program here at Methacton School District. Mr. Helm, you've done a tremendous job. You're here just about every year that I can remember with some astonishing news on the work that our students and our faculty, and along with our parents, do for these students. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. My name is Bob Helm, and I'm a physics teacher at the high school. I'm science research coordinator at the high school. I'm also director of the Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science for Montgomery County, and I'm president of the Montgomery County Science Teachers Association. This year we had around 45 students participating in STEM research and at the high school, and that makes us one of the largest extracurricular groups at the high school. And we're happy with that. Our kids participate in two fairs. The Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science, where they compete at the county level, and the winners then go on to the state, and they compete at the state level. And the Intel Fair Montgomery County has, it's MCSRC at Ursinus. The winners go to Delaware Valley Science Fair, and the winners of that go to the International Fair. And again, Methacton kids really led by example, and give you a little statistic. This year, Montgomery County sent 3 kids to the International Fair in Pittsburgh, and all 3 were from Methacton High School. So we are very, very happy with that. And the kids work hard. We are a team, and we get wonderful support from the district. So I'm thankful for that. I want to apologize to the board and to everybody. We tried to squeeze the M Awards in for the May school board meeting, but we had just returned from Penn State for the state science fair, and the kids were away for 3 days, and to kind of get them off the bus and literally like walk into the LGI was a little too much. So we postponed it, and of course that means that our showing is going to be small. So I'll call your name up and come up, and I'll give you your M Award. Daniel Abraham, William Chen, Jonathan Cheng, Ananth Diabatola, Shrindi Diabatola, Sakit Gokali, he's here, Satvik Kakar, Angie Kwang, Karen Lee, Amy Oyang, Ishan Patel, Tulsi, oh, I'm sorry, Ishan, I forgot, I didn't see you sitting there.
Congratulations.
Tulsi Patel, Shreya Patil, Jason Quee.
Congratulations.
Achut Reddy. Allison Reed. Harsha Sanantham. Arushi Tiwari. Claire C. Neha Vagvala, Rebecca Varghese, Michael Wang, Jeremy Wang, Karthik Yegnish, Adam Zhang. Interesting thing is some of those names, those are kids that are already in college. They've left already. As a teacher, one of the hardest things that we face is judging success. Have our kids succeed. It's not like you're building a house or painting a wall. I was fortunate enough at the close of this school year, I ran into Neil Maida at the high school. He's one of our Science Fair alumni students. He went to the International Fair, Harvard graduate, and he just got a job as Assistant Executive Director for Product Development at Google. So I made sure that I gave him my contact number, and we'll try to work some magic. So we're happy, and again, we thank the kids, and it's their work, and the parents. Thank you very much.
Mr. Helm, thank you so much. Students, please have a great summer and enjoy. Next on our agenda, recognition of guest and scheduled speakers. We have the Methacton Education Foundation check presentation. President Mr. Beam and our Executive Director, Nikki Krelovich, are here this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe, and board members and community members. As you know, because we tell this every time we come up here, the foundation exists in order to raise money to help deserving students within the school district with various programs that are just not able to be covered by the school district's budget. And tonight I am absolutely delighted to let you know that we have approved 4 grants to 4 different organizations in the total sum of $39,730.01. And this is only the beginning. We as a community are coming together, and I'm just delighted to see the community, the school board, the faculty, all working together to provide deserving students, many of whom are our best and brightest, but many of whom also are some of our most needy students, helping them in different ways. And tonight I just want to tell you very briefly, we're giving $3,125 to the Electric Car Club to rebuild a box truck motor. And if you've never seen the Electric Car Club and the wonderful things they do, you really owe it to yourself. It's incredible. I was blown away the first time I was there. We're delighted to help them out. One of the history clubs, the JV History Club, we paid for their registration fees for the National JV History Bowl, and we're delighted to help them out in that way. For the high school and the Music Theory Technology and Recording course, we're funding over $20,000 for equipment for a program that's going to be very, very exciting that you will see. It's going to be part of a new course that's going to happen, and we're really coming into the 21st century, and this is something, again, that our budget just doesn't cover, and the foundation is delighted to help in that capacity. And last, but certainly not least, for any of you, and any of you who ever took driver's education yourself, driver's education is much different than when I took it, certainly, and maybe perhaps for some of you. There are simulators which we have at the school district, and we've had them for some time, and they're old. And like anything else with technology, they need replacement. And these things are not inexpensive. The foundation is happy to contribute one simulator, and that's to the tune of $15,850. So I'm going to ask for this check presentation for any of the sponsors, and I know Mr. McCoach is out with the band, so he may not be able to make it in for this, but any of the sponsors and any of the students who are involved with any of these organizations to please come down and join us for this check presentation.
If everyone turns me down, you should be great. Push it over there. Welcome. Thank you.
It's going to pop.
Thank you, the Education Foundation, for all your hard work and contributions to the efforts of the Methacton School District students and staff. That ends the reports for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. For reports, I know we don't have Mr. Earnshaw here this evening. I don't know if he asked anyone from the Finance Committee to present the minutes in his absence, or you don't. Well, if you're just going to be reading them, I think we're okay with just saying the minutes are attached to the agenda, if anyone cares to review them there. Property Committee, Mr. Navarrete.
Thank you. The Property Committee met on June 11th at 6:30 p.m. at the Farina Education Center. In attendance were Mr. Navarrete, Mr. Earnshaw, Mrs. Hull, Mrs. Reese, Mr. Bricker, Mr. Fretz. Our guests that evening were Mr. Miller from Fidavia and Mr. Leinbach from AEM Architects. We presented an updated version of the master plan timeline that included additional time in there for an annual review of the master plan workbook and also the earlier bidding timeline that's been planned. On our current capital projects, Mr. Miller noted that demolition work at Arrowhead and the auditorium is substantially complete, and the project is on track for on-time completion. We reviewed the change orders that are on the agenda for a vote this evening. 4 of them, 1 to conserve the mural painted on the back wall of the stage, and 3 more to address findings from the acoustic testing report. As noted in the agenda, the net impact of all 4 changes is a credit of $18,346.01. Other high points at the high school, Mr. Miller informed the committee that the MEP and roofing projects are on track to begin on June 18th. The scope is being finalized for the masonry project that will come before the committee in July. At Eagleville, Mr. Fretz presented the committee with another report on specific issues with the window frames and masonry. This report will be used to generate scope for immediate repairs to gasketing this summer. The project scope will be presented to the committee in July, but will not need to be completed before students return to the building. He also informed the committee that the previously discussed roof drain will be rerouted to another drain line. They will not have to excuse me, they don't have to work on the slab of the building so that it exits the perimeter, and the full scope of the bid package will be presented to the committee in July. Under the field project, Mr. Miller gave the committee a brief update that discussions are ongoing with the solicitor to determine how best to proceed in light of the litigation with Applied Landscape. Under Arrowhead, the committee reviewed an extensive list of work items prepared by FDAVI and the administration that represents the most likely scope of work to Arrowhead in the summer of 2019. The list, which was previously requested by the committee as part of its ongoing evaluation of the future of the Arrowhead building, identified approximately $1 million worth of work that should be prioritized for next summer. Under the 2019 capital plan, Mr. Miller presented an updated facilities workbook, updated with costs for completed and ongoing projects, and the proposed scope of work for 2019 will be reviewed at the July committee meeting. Under transportation, Mr. Bricker presented the committee with a summary of routes for the extended school year, covering approximately 325 students. Only 7 of the 79 total routes, both AM and PM, exceeded 50 minutes, but those that did were due to distance, and none exceeded 56 minutes. The committee also discussed the open coordinator position, updates to the reservation process for field trips, the upcoming deliverables due between the district and First Student for the 2018-19 school year, and potential changes to the high school student parking plan. During courtesy of the floor, Candy Alabac of Eagleville commented on the seats in the Arcola Auditorium, concerns about moisture infiltration through the Eagleville windows, student enrollment, and the future of the Arrowhead building. Jim Malik commented on the work scope and potential expenditures at Arrowhead, the cost of repairs to the Eagleville windows, asked about the timing of the M&M enrollment, and his personal outlook on district enrollment. The meeting was adjourned at 9:43, and all members were happy to get home before bedtime.
Thank you, Mr. Navarrete. Education Committee, Ms. Reese.
We met on June 4th. All members of the committee were in attendance. First up, Dr. Spiewak gave an extensive review of student activities and athletics. Next up was a new topic, intensive therapeutic mental health support. It's a new topic in Montgomery County, really. It's a growing concern. The past 3 months alone, there was an increase in mental health needs. Students basically fit into 3 tiers. Tier 3 considered students whose needs are met outside of the district. And September through February, there were 11 students in this tier. March through May, there were 9 students. Dr. Engstad discussed an in-district plan that included many benefits to students and district as a whole, and I thank her for bringing this to our attention in the committee, for moving it forward. Next up was key action items for 2018-19. There were many discussed. A brief list includes the main curriculum objectives throughout the districts, K-5 Wonder support, grade 6 collections, grade 7 and 8 social studies, algebra and trigonometry, German honors, AP research, ALEX is being extended 7 to 12, exact path, and link it. Next up was the federal programs monitoring summary. It went very well. Dr. Katona gave us an example of their visit to Eagleville. It's very thorough. It even included an equity plan between the Title I schools, Woodland and Eagleville, the use of the iPads with the Reading Special and ISS, and our technology department is able to tell us exactly where all those iPads are, and so that we know that we're utilizing our technology appropriately with our Title I students. Next up was Exact Path. It's something the district is looking into for a possible replacement for Study Island. And Link It, which is, we're also looking into a better data collection resource than we currently use Performance Plus. We also added an August meeting. It wasn't on the calendar, so that has been added for August 6th. We went over the enrollment report. There was no courtesy of the floor, and we adjourned at 10:05. There was courtesy of the floor. There just was no comment at courtesy of the floor. Excuse me.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Policy Committee, Ms. Hull?
The Policy Committee met on June 6th. The meeting was called to order at 6:31 p.m. In attendance were Mr. Brian Earnshaw, myself, Mr. Michael Ryan, Dr. David Zerby, and Mr. Eric Fry. Policies 210 medications, Policy 218.2 terroristic threats, and Policy 227 controlled substances were discussed, but deferred to future meetings with requests for more input. Policies 218.1 weapons, 304.1 nepotism, 311 reduction of staff, and policy 312 assessment of superintendent were recommended for first reading tonight. The committee also recommends the repeal of policy 310 abolishing a position. The committee is following with the recommendation of PSBA, and the revised policy 311 now includes provisions for economic furlough as modified last year in section 1124 of Pennsylvania Public School Code. There was no update on sample handbook templates. They remain under administrative review. Under new business, I inquired about policy 140, charter schools, which was deferred from the May meeting. During courtesy of the floor, Dr. Malik commented on policy 311 and inquired on the recent impact of the early retirement incentive program. He also commented on policy 277, controlled substances, and inquired to the penalty for board members who do not follow board policy and recommended the creation of a policy. The meeting adjourned at 8:19 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Intermediate unit, Mr. Winters.
Yeah, I'm good now. The meeting of the IU was on May 23rd in Norristown. It was preceded with a recognition of the retirees. They did an outstanding program of recognizing a lot of experience at the IU. Just a couple of comments related to the agenda, related to the activities. The main approval for administrative staff was a Miss Holly Acosta, who's now the Director of Office and Early Childhood Services. She comes from O&J Roberts in that position, a key position in the IU. Also, Methacton it was voted on and agreed as part of Methacton Upper Moreland School District that we will reimburse the IU at a biannual basis in the amount of equal to 8.5% of access dollars, and that's just the way of passing the dollars through. One thing I want to talk about on the legal side, a legal update, Community and Government Relations. On the federal side, the Military Education Savings Account Act that we had discussed earlier has not successfully moved through committee, but they're looking for other activities to try to get that in. It involves the potential of allowing for a $2,500 voucher that could be used for private school related to military-connected students. The Farm Bill reauthorization bill was voted down, and this was the one that we discussed about the supplemental nutritional assistant program and about requiring I guess, work requirements to be able to receive some of this. This was voted down. Speaker Ryan has asked for a motion to reconsider the bill somewhere around in the middle of June. I'm not aware if that has happened or not. On the Pennsylvania level, there's lots of activities. I just highlight a few of these. Mr. Beam is here. So the EITC funds, there was a House Bill 2156 that was passed 183-7, creates and implements a career technical education partnership tax credit program in which businesses can make donations to public schools, CTCs, and institutions of higher education via career and technical educational partnership organizations in exchange for a tax credit. The program will begin with a $15 million limit. However, this bill will lower the availability of the general fund revenues for education. The voucher bill in Pennsylvania on May 22nd, the Senate approved Senate Bill 2. And the civics education bill on May 22nd was approved on House Bill 564. The bill requires school entities to administer at least once during the grades 7 through 12 a locally developed assessed U.S. history, government, or civics class. There's additional associated requirements around that. Interesting also, the Senate Education Committee also approved Senate Resolution 322. The resolution directs the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee to study the effectiveness of standardized testing, including Keystones and SATs, and their use as indicators of academic achievement, building performance, and educator effectiveness. And the last one I will point out is that PlanCon. A year past its original deadline, the PlanCon Advisory Committee work group released its report and recommendations. The recommendations include simplifying the formula and process, using a grant program for maintenance and repair projects, and broadening and providing more flexibility and incentives for districts that build according to high-performance building standards. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. That was a lot of information for us. We appreciate it. North Montco Technical Career Center, Ms. Drummond, I believe, is giving our report this month.
Thank you. The Joint Operating Committee of North Montco Tech met on Monday, June 18th. We recognized 44 students who attended the Skills USA competition in Hershey. The feedback from the chaperones was that the students were well prepared and professional. The Joint Operating Committee recognized many students who excelled at the Skills USA and competition and will be attending the Nationals competition in Louisville, Kentucky. There have been several retirements at the school. Interviews for replacements are going well and will continue through the summer. A comment was made by a member of the public that the school seems to be off to a good start under the new director, Gina Partovich, and already some positive changes have been seen. The Joint Operating Committee approved a 3-year collective bargaining agreement. The salary schedule is based on a formula of all 5 home schools. North Montco Tech plans to address future recruitment and retention needs by adding tuition reimbursement for new hires from industry who are seeking their teaching certification. And finally, Dr. Gallagher, Superintendent of Souderton, was renewed as the Superintendent of Record for North Montco Tech. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drummond. Student board representatives are off for the summer. Methacton Education Foundation, Mr. Beam, or Ms. Krlovich.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce, well, not introduce because you've met her before, but Nikki Krlovich is our executive director. She's going to give our report tonight. But before she does, I just want to follow up on Mr. Winters' comments very briefly. The governor did pass the budget, and as part of that budget, there are these EITC credits, and as he alluded to, and I just want everybody to know, because this was something that I did not understand, and it's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. I'm still not certain I understand it, but as a result of additional money, there is a total of $210 million that is available throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for programs that help school districts. However, you should know that only $50 million of that $210 million is for public school districts. All the rest are for private and parochial schools. So there is a real, you can draw your own conclusions about that, but there's a real imbalance. You should know, just from an historical perspective, the program originally was started as a result of lobbying efforts by private and parochial schools. So they are getting the lion's share of the money, and there are many more public school districts within the Commonwealth, and we are, I don't want to say the crumbs, but we have to fight for that portion that is left. And one of the things that I think all of us may want to look into is seeing what we can do to try to raise the amount that is available for public school districts. Now, within the foundation, we're as on top of this as we can be, or at least we're trying. We're trying our very best, and we have gotten money. I've told you that we raised over $100,000 last year from donors. We expect to raise more this year and more in the future. But as more public school districts understand about this, we're ahead of the curve, frankly, in terms of where knowledge is. The competition is only going to get more intense, and it's going to become more difficult. And you should know that with respect to the business EITC programs, they are completely full. So if you have a business and you want to participate in this and have your corporate income tax dollars allocated toward your local school district foundation like Methacton, you have to get into a waiting line. You can't get into the program. So there's a lot of competition. We are working on it. We're talking with our legislators to see what we can do to try to get more for the district. But I just want, and there'll be more reports about this because it is an unusual, not an unusual perhaps, but it's not as clear and transparent a situation as any of us would like it to be. However, we're doing what we can to ferret through. I was out at a meeting in Altoona a couple weeks ago talking with the general partner of a limited partnership that we have used, and he's assured me that he's going to do his very best to include us. That's not exactly the comforting words I wanted to hear. However, it was comforting in the sense that he said that there will be some money for us. So it's going to be one of these things where the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and we're going to stay really squeaky about this so that we can get as much as we possibly can for our students here in the district. Now, the rest of the report, I want to turn over to Nikki, who's going to do a better job than I. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jim. Tonight, I'm going to give you a little recap about what the foundation has been up to this year. We have had a really good year at the Methacton Education Foundation. In the 2017-2018 fiscal year, we raised $193,000, which is a new record for the foundation. And I, of course, would like to take credit for that, but being the new guy on board, that was certainly the efforts of our entire board, who's working very hard to raise money. We also funded a record number of grants this year. 4 of them were included in the check that Jim talked about earlier this evening. In addition to those, we also awarded $2,400 for AP testing costs for students in need, $3,100 to the Robotics Club, $450 for membership fees for Montgomery County Science Teacher Association for all of our science faculty, $2,000 in loaner musical instruments for elementary students in need, $4,500 for a college tour trip for qualified economically disadvantaged students, $1,100 for loaner musical instruments for Skyview students in need, $1,200 for the Teams Club to go to nationals, and the Woodland Video News program that you saw last meeting at the tune of $4,700. And while this is awesome, there is even more that we can do. We are currently working on our fund development campaign for 2018-2019, and we're going to kick the year off with a board campaign and roll right into a staff giving campaign. We'll also be running appeals to parents, grandparents, the community, alumni, and businesses. In addition to fund development, we're working with administrators to think big about the projects that they've always wanted to do but are beyond the district's budget. We've asked them about innovative programs that they have at other districts, but not at Methacton yet. Throughout the summer, we'll be meeting with building principals and administrators to help the foundation formulate a plan that funds big projects to make a large, lasting impact. We need these big projects to attract the big donors. Last month, I also told you how most of the successful education foundations partner closely with their districts to achieve the best results. I can tell you that Dr. Zerbe and his team fully embrace the foundation and our role in raising money for Methacton. They've gone out of their way to make introductions, share ideas, and encourage other folks in Methacton to partner with the foundation. It has been a really good, record-breaking year at the Methacton Education Foundation, but we are just getting started.
Thank you, Ms. Krelovich. Communications, Ms. Lynch.
My friend, my coach. So I just wanted to bring the board's attention to another project that we partnered with another organization in our community, which is the Shenandoah organization. They have a foundation. The Shenandoah community supported the summer library program, which is currently taking place in our schools. So we started off at Eagleville, and we sort of have some students that trickled in, and we're hoping that it'll pick up steam as we move into Worcester, and then Arrowhead, and we finish off at Woodland Elementary School. So we're very excited to open our libraries for the first time in the district's history during the summer months. We're thankful to our librarians for their help in planning the program, and to Dr. Katona as well for helping us plan activities for the students that are valuable and help them keep reading throughout the summer months. So thank you to Shenandoah, and thank you to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. As Superintendent's report, Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. This evening, I just want to bring the board and the public's attention to an item under number 13 on the agenda, under other gifts and donations. Please be advised that a number 9, under 13A, number 9, will read as follows. Accept a donation of $2,859.60 from the Shannondale Foundation to support the staffing for the new summer library program. As you may recognize under the agenda, under personnel, there's an item there to approve the staffing of the individuals. This will then complete the transaction for accepting the donation. All right. And then my last comment, and an unfortunate one, under item 10L2, if you could just turn to the agenda. And that is on page 7 of 11. It's unfortunate for me to share with the board and the public that the person listed here, Jody Casanova, unfortunately passed. And I'd ask the board and the public to just join me in a moment of silence in recognition of her contributions to the Methacton School District. Thank you. That ends my report.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Before we open this up to public comment on board action items, I just wanted to make a statement. I'd like to refer members of the public to Policy 903. The purpose of this policy is that the board recognizes the value to school governance of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in board meetings. The board also recognizes its responsibility for proper governance of the district and the need to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner. The primary function of a board meeting is to conduct the business of the board, and we ask that members of the public show courtesy and respect to the board just as we do to the public as well. Things like name calling and calling out and carrying on side conversations are very disruptive to the actions of the board and to the work that we're doing here. So I ask that everyone try to bear that in mind over the course of the meeting. And with that, I will open this up to public comment on board action items. Mr. Bickelman.
Joe Bickelman, Audubon. Under 9D, depositories. For approval, I would not have Wells Fargo on there because of their well-publicized event that they had in their bank where they established fraudulent accounts, over 2 million fraudulent accounts for customers that in their names that they weren't aware of. Second item I have is right under that E. I just want to thank Mr. Bricker for straightening out that workman's comp clarification on the cost, the vendor listed from last year and the money that we're saving. And I appreciate you chasing down a savings of $153,000 that we were paying for I don't know how many years not using SDIC, which consists of over 100 and some school entities that have been participating in SDIC since the late 70s. Item G below that, waste removal and recycling bid. I would go with the lowest responsible bidder. I heard that Waste Management was $8,000 less. I didn't get the details. I heard that there was some paperwork that Waste Management didn't present. I didn't know exactly what that was, but I heard other districts going with Waste Management in the IU bid because they were $8,000 less than Mascaro. I would just go with the lowest bid that you think is going to save the district money. Item 10B, accept the resignation of Karthik Ganesh. There's no date. This person submitted a letter, I guess, of resignation and left out a date. It just seems open-ended. I don't know what benefit that is to the school district, but I wouldn't approve that unless I had a date from Mr. Ganesh. He received a $7,000 raise effective May 23rd of this year. He was going to get another raise July 1st of 2018, and he's going elsewhere, and it's open-ended. He can stay as long as he likes, and when does the public find out what that date is? But I wouldn't approve it without a date. And I would get away from the practice of these mid-year raises. We gave Stuart Whiteleather a raise in June of $10,000. He didn't make it to the following June. He got a raise of $10,000 in June. This was years ago under a prior board. He got another raise July 1st. He didn't make it to the following June. I heard that Bob Harney got a $14,000 raise in January one year, and I think we should get away from that. If you need to adjust the salaries based on market conditions and maintaining your employment here and retaining good people here, I would just let it wait till the following July 1st. And I would like to know, under the item of compensated leaves in personnel, 10J, the compensated leave for Colleen Dodds. This isn't something that, this is not a sabbatical, it's the district approving this leave for professional development. I'd like to know what she's doing as a fifth grade teacher that we're going to be paying half her salary, I understand, and benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman. Mr. Andrews.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. Under Personnel, item 10, 10A, resignations. We have 5 resignations on the agenda, mostly effective at the end of June, and that's an unusual occurrence in my experience over the last decade, so I'm wondering if the public could have a general comment as to why the resignations. Is it pay raises or illness or what? I'd appreciate an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Anyone else for public comment on board action items this evening? Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. I would have thought after the last meeting you would have read 903, not the part you just quoted to us, and after the no confidence vote you got. But I'll read you Board Policy 011. Advocate earnestly. Engage the community by seeking input, building networks, and generating action.
I'm sorry, what action item is this referring to?
Page 8, Methacton Code of Conduct. Lead responsibly.
What action item?
Number 4, Methacton Code of Conduct. Second reading.
Oh, for under policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I continue now? Work together in a spirit of harmony, respect, and cooperation, and adhere to an established set of rules and procedures. Now, the reason I read that is I read the Code of Conduct, and I think you really should table it, because after reading it, there's nothing in there that applies to the board. This applies to students, parents, guardians, staff, building administration. There's nothing in there that talks about the board code of conduct. Well, I don't see how you can apply this to everybody else but the board. So if you're going to pass something that you're going to hold the students to a parents, guardian, staff, and the building administration to a code of conduct, you need to hold the board to a code of conduct as well. So, you can't have 2 standards, one for the students and no standards for you. How does that work? I brought up as an analogy, you have one standard for Mr. Ryan in his drunken disorderly situation, but then you discipline all your students for the similar conduct. So to me, that puts you guys in legal jeopardy. So you're enforcing something against your students, but when you board members have similar conduct, there's no ramifications. So that's number one. Number two, just from a perspective of setting an example for your students. You can't have the president of the board calling me disgusting, but then expect your students to look at that behavior and say, well, if they can do it, why can't we? You know, at the last meeting, or 2 meetings ago, I was talking about the teacher retirement program, and Ms. Reese is up front going blah, 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 blah. That kind of behavior, you can't have your students looking at that, saying that that's okay. Why can't we disrespect people too? So from a pure, emulating people who are supposed to be at the pinnacle, how do you justify that to a student? So, I don't see that. Now, there's no policy currently, and this is why I said it at the policy committee. What policy is there that deals with board conduct and board violations of board policy? None. But these students, they violate the policy, you're going to come down with the hammer. So you need to pass a policy that deals with your behavior and violations of board policy just like them. So you got to scrap this and come up with a policy that deals with their code of conduct and your code of conduct. What are you guys, elitists? You're not subject to any rules, regulations, or any discipline?
Dr. Malik, please wrap up.
Sure. So why don't you guys tell me how you're above it all? Mr. Navarrette's smiling. Maybe he understands it, or he thinks he's
Dr. Malik,
wrong.
please wrap up.
I'm wrapped up.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment on board action items? Ms. Alabak.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. I mentioned last week about policy 123.2, the sudden cardiac arrest, which the policy states it covers athletes. Personally, I feel it needs to cover the students in all the buildings. I can't find anything what the school district has in place if something happens to a student, because you're also dealing with minor children. So that becomes another issue. I mean, I understand about the athletes because there's been a push in the last couple years to get your child checked, and speaking from personal experience, that can be missed by a doctor regardless of all the tests that they do. You can have a student in your building that exhibits the same symptoms and it may be ignored, but we don't have a policy to cover that. So I don't know if you want to make a separate one or include this with this athletes, but I think it would be smart on the schools district's part to look into that, because cardiac arrest is increasing in children 18 and under. It's becoming a problem in this country. So maybe it's something you need to look into. And Mr. Winters giving us a legislative report is very good for us to know. But also the governor on Sunday signed a law stating about eminent domain, that there will be no eminent domain without a court approval. Lower Merion School District wanted to go in and declare eminent domain on property that was preserved, 42 acres. And Harrisburg, Warren Kemp and Kate Harper and a few other representatives, it was a bipartisan issue, presented a bill in Harrisburg, which is the fastest bill to ever clear in the history of Harrisburg. It cleared the Senate, the House. It was a major bipartisan effort, and they all voted to keep this from happening. This affects the school districts in this state.
I'm sorry, Ms. Alabak, which action item is that?
Well, Mr. Winters in his report brought up legislation. I was just adding to another legislative thing that you should know.
And I appreciate that, but that would be for during courtesy of the floor, because that's not a voting item for this evening.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know there's new rules. Thank you.
Same rules. Anyone else for public comment on board action items? May I have a motion to approve the special meeting minutes for the meeting held on May 16th, 2018, the board meeting minutes of the work session held on May 16th, 2018, and the board meeting held on May 22nd, 2018? Ms. Drummond, can I have a second? Ms. Hull, any comments from the board? Mr. Navarette?
Yeah, just one. I just want to amend a statement that was in there because I guess I was on the either on the phone or the computer for the May 16th special meeting, and it got garbled, and I see when Mary translated it, she stated that Mr. Navarette commented that his intention is to take that money, at least $150,000 to $200,000. So I just want to amend that paragraph in the minutes to read that Mr. Navarette commented that his intention is to use that money, and this was in reference to the budget surplus, to pay for at least $150,000 to $200,000 of projects that are normal maintenance and we shouldn't be borrowing to pay for. Mr. Navarette stated that he would use it first to pay for those projects in the current year, then offset our borrowing with whatever is left. Mr. Navarette said there is probably $500,000 to $1 million that we could either reduce or defer from the current plan for next year. There was another statement at the end of that that had said about something about $500 million. So just wanted to clarify, I'm not taking any money.
We do appreciate that clarification. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as amended? Okay, the motion passes 8-0.
Mr. Navarette, if you wouldn't mind, if you could send an email to myself and to Ms. Mandia indicating that specific section, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, fiscal items. Mr. Bricker?
Tonight for your approval, we have the list of bills, the treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, the depositories for the 2018-2019 fiscal year, insurance carriers and premiums for the 2018-2019 fiscal year, school breakfast and lunch prices, waste removal and recycling bid, change order GC1 for $18,346.01.
Thank you, Mr. Bricker. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills, treasurer's report, and budgetary transfers as presented? Mr. Navarette, can I have a second? Ms. Cancro, are there any comments from the board? Ms. Hall?
I'm sorry if this was discussed already. Could Mr. Bricker explain what accounts we do have at Wells Fargo?
We have one account with $300 in it that is part of a scholarship fund that was started years ago. I am actually looking to close it down before the end of this school year. However, if I don't, it still needs to stay open.
Understood. Any other comments on items A, B, and C? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, the motion carries 8-0. May I have a motion to approve the depositories for the 2018-2019 fiscal year as presented? Mr. Winters, may I have a second? Mr. Ryan, any comments from the board? Mr. Bricker, I appreciate that clarification for Wells Fargo. Seeing no other comments, all those in favor? The motion carries 8-0. May I have a motion to approve the insurance carriers and premiums for the 2018-2019 fiscal year as presented? Ms. Cancro, may I have a second? Ms. Drummond, any comments from the board? Ms. Cancro?
Thank you for the savings.
I think we can all echo that one. Thank you, Mr. Bricker. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries 8-0. Item F, may I have a motion to approve the school breakfast and lunch prices as presented? Mr. Ryan, can I have a second? Ms. Reese, any comments from the board?
I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Zerbe said at the last meeting. Although I wasn't there, I watched, and he mentioned the committee that we were forming or that had been formed, and I wanted to remind any of those committee members, if they're watching, to do their homework, because I think it's due soon. We had to look at some surveys, so we might need to send out an email reminder, because I did not do my homework yet, and to thank the district and
the woman in charge and Ms. Lynch for getting that committee going, because we're just trying to get the best food service that we can for the kids. So I'm excited about it. So thank you.
I show Monday, July 16th as the due date for the surveys.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board on the school breakfast and lunch prices? Okay. All those in favor? The motion carries 8-0. May I have a motion to approve the waste removal and recycling as presented? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Ryan, any comments from the board on this item? Mr. Winters.
Try to provide some clarity to this, and hopefully from my own mind. My understanding is that the previous contract was around $132,000 with Waste Management, which was my understanding of the bidding process extremely low compared to what the market is for the services that Methacton got based on the bids that we received through the IU. My understanding is that Waste Management and Advanced won most of the Montgomery County Trash and Disposal Recycling Services bids, and Mascaro only won one bid, is my understanding from the IU. Mascaro came to the IU and requested that we not consider Waste Management's bid because they had not filled in whatever that means. But the bottom line is all the paperwork at the time that was required during the bidding process. And they felt that because they had not committed all the requirements for the bidding process, that Waste Management should be declared not a viable source. Waste Management had won the majority of the districts in Montgomery County. The recommendation from the solicitor at the IU was it was insignificant. I'm paraphrasing, but more or less insignificant differences, and it was not material to discount Waste Management's contract bids. So the IU as a whole voted to accept this and push it on to the school districts to independently decide how to accept these bids, to accept this bid or not. And this is where I'm getting a little fuzzy. Mascaro then sent a letter to Methacton and saying, sort of repeating what I said. We took it to our solicitor, and our solicitor sort of agreed with Mascaro that the bidding process was not necessarily clean, and it was a recommendation of Mr. Fry, I think it was, to not accept the Waste Management's bid, which is $8,000 lower than Mascaro's. The third bid was higher than Mascaro's, by the way. So we are to the point where the bid between Waste Management and Mascaro is about $8,000 more for Mascaro. So my understanding is it's up to the school district to be able to accept these bids on our own accord. We're not required to accept these bids. But there is a $8,000 difference. Did I summarize that correctly, Tim?
Yeah, it's $8,000 over 3 years.
Okay. And which would mean about close to 39,000, whatever you got here. Yep. A $40,000 increase over the 3 years from the current contract. But it would be $8,000 more over 3 years for the lowest bid.
Correct.
So my question, Mr. Dooley, is what liability does the school district have around not accepting an IU? My understanding from the solicitor at the IU is that this is a package that can be accepted or not accepted from a district's point of view. And what would be the justification for us not accepting the lowest bid?
In accepting or awarding any bid, the district is required to award to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. So it's not just lowest. Both of these bidders are responsible, so that is not an issue. The issue then became, are they responsive? Have they responded in total to the requirements of the bid? It is the opinion of our office that Waste Management is not responsive. As a result, that bid doesn't really exist at this point for the purposes of the board award. However, the board is not required to award at all at this point. But it is our opinion that before the board tonight is either the choice to award the bid to Mascaro, who is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder, or to not award this evening and rebid.
Okay, thank you. So what was the definition of non-responsiveness for Mascaro in your eyes?
For Waste Management.
For waste, I'm sorry, yes.
And I'm sorry, I frankly don't have those details.
Right.
That was in speaking with Mr. Fry. I personally have not reviewed those details, but I know that he's strongly of that opinion.
Yeah.
And I apologize for
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, my understanding is that it was, when you go through, I don't know this, but the argument by Mascaro was that when you go through this bidding process, you have to have everything lined up, ready to go, knowing exactly where you're going to dump the trash, et cetera, where you're going to recycle it, and all those type of things. And it can't be just sort of after you've gone through the bidding process getting that additional information. That was the way it was portrayed at the IU.
And I would agree with that if that was what was in the bid specs, assuming that that's in the bid specs, and I think that that makes sense.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winters and Mr. Dooley, for the clarification. Ms. Reese, you had a comment?
No, I appreciate the clarification and people questioning it. The only other thing that I would add is $8,000 over 3 years with a company that's reputable, that handles the waste in Lower Providence, and who is in our township. To me, it just is a no-brainer. That we're always asking, where do these companies come from? So that's just another thought I just had when I looked up, everyone's always asking at property, where does this company come from? And so I just real quick looked up, and address is Audubon, so that was just another thing on my personal side.
Are there any other comments from the board?
Michael, I guess I am concerned in a sense of not knowing what wasn't in the paperwork. What did they miss when not filling out the paperwork correctly if the majority voted for that other company? And we're the only ones. I'm just a little concerned. That's all. No, the majority is, they're independently voting on that, on which disposal company they're going to go with.
It was a recommendation of the solicitor that this was not material enough to not accept the lowest bids for the IU. So the recommendation from the IU was to accept the bid package as it came to us as a board to vote on.
So to clarify, the recommendation of the IU solicitor was that this was not material, which is contrary to the recommendation of our solicitor, which says it is and makes them a non-responsive bidder. So it's kind of taking either solicitor's opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion?
I just want to make a clarification on what was last said there. It's not whether we take one solicitor's opinion over another. The IU has no balls in the game. They just created a service to create a document that said, please bid, and it's up to the district. So, the district needs to go by, if they're listening to any solicitor, they need to go by the solicitor that they have. That's where they're protected in part of the decision-making process. But we're not able to go back to the IU. The IU is not a part of this process any longer.
Sorry to keep on jumping in on this. The one part of the fact that probably should be known also is that Mascaro was usually not the second lowest bid in Methacton. They were. In most of the districts, it was irrelevant that Waste Management was the lowest bid because Allied was the second lowest bid. So it really is, it's not, it's up to Advanced, I guess, to have a complaint related to Waste Management. They did not bring a complaint. So it really is down to, I think, us and Western Center Tech Center, I guess. Is that possible? I'm not sure who the other one is, but it's down to 2 districts that would have this issue.
Okay. At this point, we'll take a vote then. All those in favor of approving the waste removal and recycling as presented this evening? Opposed? Okay. The motion carries 6-2 with Ms. Drummond and Mr. Winters opposed. May I have a motion to approve the change order GC-1 as a credit in the amount of $18,346.01 with SMJ for the Arcola Intermediate School renovations to the auditorium as presented this evening? Ms. Hall, may I have a second? Mr. Navarrete, any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries 8-0. It's always nice to see a change order work out in our favor. Personnel items, Dr. Sosnovic.
Thank you. For your approval tonight, we have 5 resignations professional, 1 resignation classified, 1 non-renewal of a contract for a temporary professional employee. We have 7 employments professional, 5 employments for summer temporary help, 1 compensated leave preferred professional development, 8 uncompensated leaves professional, 4 uncompensated leaves classified. We have 1 sabbatical for your approval, 5 supplemental contracts, the pre-kinder jumpstart program, classified substitute lists, and volunteers.
Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic. I think I'm going to take these in some chunks here. We'll look at first the departures. Can I have a motion to approve personnel items 10A, B, and C as presented this evening? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond, any comments from the board? Mr. Winters?
Yeah, Troy, for the question that came from the courtesy of the floor, I realize that some of this is quiet or needs to be individual, but can you give generic definitions of reasons for these late announcements of leaving the district?
Sure. 2 individuals decided to stay at home with their children. 2 individuals are moving to private industry, and another one to another educational institution.
Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic. And regarding the resignation of Karthik Ganesh, I believe the reason that that is open-ended, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is because we are coordinating his departure with other staffing changes here, as well as the needs at the district that he is moving to. Is that correct?
That is accurate.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing none?
On A.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On A to C.
A to C only, yes.
Yeah, I just want to, I've enjoyed working with Karthik in the limited exposure. Obviously, it's a loss for this school district, but wish him well in finally getting a position that he's well deserving of.
Troy, on letter C, what was the, I guess, what was the position that person was in, and what was the associated salary?
I could follow up with the associated salary, but it was a .2 social studies position at Arcola.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, this is the second step in a process of a non-renewal, so you approved the first step of this last month.
Any other comments? Going once, going twice? Okay. Motion is on the floor. Can I have a vote to approve items A, B, and C under personnel this evening? Okay. That's 8-0, all in favor. Motion carries. And so now I'm going to take items D, E, F, and G. These are all the employment items that are listed on the agenda this evening. Can I have a motion to approve items 10D, E, F, and G as presented here? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Navarette. Any comments from the board?
Troy, can you, are of these 7 professional, were any of these, I recognize some of the names as being long-term subs, so I assume that's a lot of these individuals, and I want to thank you for getting so many of them filled so quickly.
He kind of took my question. I recognized a few of the names as long-term subs, and I was just glad that we interviewed them, gave them the chance, that they have, in fact, an experience. And I know it's been a topic of conversation that it's hard to keep people in those positions, and happy to see that they're able to get a full-time contracted position. So thank you.
Anyone else with comments on these items? Seeing none, can I have a vote to, all those in favor of approving items D, E, F, and G as presented here? Motion carries 8-0. Can I have a motion to approve items, there is no H or I, so item J, K, L. Actually, let's just do this. Does anyone have a reason to take anything from J through R separately? Seeing none, then I'm going to say let's have a motion to approve all the personnel items listed as items 10J, K, L, M, N, O, Q, and R. See, there's nothing there for P. Can I have a motion to approve those items? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Navarette? I'm sorry, did I miss something?
Yeah, there is something there for P, and I just wanted to make sure you mentioned that there's a classified substitute list.
I see. Okay, on my copy of the agenda, there's nothing listed, but it must be an attachment. I thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Sosnovic. So then let's amend the motion to be the approval of J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, and R. And we have Ms. Reese for the amended motion and Mr. Navarette for the amended motion. Thank you. Any comments from the board on these items?
Troy, you did explain it last meeting, and watching it on at my kitchen table is different than sitting here at the table, so I apologize for making you repeat it. I still get confused between the difference between a sabbatical and let me read it correctly, compensated professional development. I just think, what is the difference? Because I still get confused.
I'm glad I kept my notes.
Yeah, and I know you ran over it. I need a little remediation here.
So,
teaching term.
Both of them are covered underneath the Public School Code 1166. And that, as part of the school code, is called sabbatical and leave of absence. Okay, so it talks about your sabbatical and leave for professional development. Those two are then, let's say, institutionalized here at Methacton through board policy. And there's 2 board policies that cover it. It's 338 and 3381. Okay. In order for the MEA to have the right to those, the things that are spelled out in that school code and in that policy, they then have to have that bargained into their contract. And that is, bargained in, I think it's in, if I can recall, Article 15 of their contract, okay? So through, Article 15. So long as that any one individual meets the requirements in those stated documents that I had mentioned, those policies in that law, they would then be afforded the right to that, through their collective bargaining agreement. I hope that was good.
Okay. So why is one called, and maybe I'm missing something, I apologize. Why is one called compensated leave and one called sabbatical leave? Or is that like private?
I've asked the same question.
Okay.
Because I don't understand why it would, if it should be, for me, in my opinion, maybe called sabbatical dash medical, sabbatical dash professional development, but historically here at Methacton, it's always been listed underneath those two. And so it was described to me as that it was listed that way in the past so that the board was assured that, or made known that it was approving a compensated leave. Although the other one is too, for medical reasons, but this is, because it's a compensated leave for a specific purpose of professional development. So that was what was explained to me.
Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic.
I just have a question then. Are we allowed to know what the professional development, their compensated professional development, I understand the medical, but the professional, are we allowed to know what is their development they're focusing on?
Yeah, I could gladly provide you with that detail in the weekly memo if you so choose.
And I assume that there is a process that we require staff to go through when they are requesting compensated leave for professional development, and there's approvals that are in place through administration.
That's correct. They wouldn't make the board agenda for your consideration if they didn't meet the minimum requirements of the policy and school code.
Thank you for clarifying all of that, Dr. Sosnovic. I appreciate it. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, just more of a process or procedural question. So under item K, we've got a number of short-term leaves here, some of which are being approved in arrears. Can you comment on that? Like, how is that handled administratively as far as payroll and whatnot?
So all the uncompensated leaves, many of these, I'm going to say, as I look at my list, for our FMLA for having a baby, in essence. So people go out for that, and that's done through our payroll office in conjunction with our human resources. So they meet every other week, talk about all the uncompensated leaves that have come up, make sure that everything is in line and up to date in our CSIU 16 financial software, so the appropriate payroll is basically calculated and provided to each employee.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, can I have a vote then? All those in favor of approving the amended motion of J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, and R as presented here this evening? Okay, the motion carries 8-0.
Kim, before you move on to the next section, I just had a question. It's not a voting item this evening, but it is listed under Dr. Zerbe's report. We've never seen a tenure list before. I was just wondering if you could add on, why that's on here. I know we're not voting for it, but why that's on the agenda.
Under Section 1108, temporary professional employment under the school code, as part of an annual process for us, we award if a teacher meets the tenure status. So as I started to read through the school code, I recognize a point where it says in Section 1108.3, the attainment of the status under paragraph 1 or 2 shall be recorded in the records of the board, and written notification thereof shall be sent to the employee. Well, we were doing half of that. We were giving a written notification of the employee. The board president, Dr. Zerbe, and the board secretary signed that. We provide that as a permanent record in their file. The minutes were not being, or the actual tenure was not being recorded in the minutes for some time. So what I had done was I assembled a list as far back as I had been able to figure out who was not recorded, to bring us up to speed, and then put a process in place so that this is continued moving forward.
So in reading the school code, it's your understanding that these items don't necessarily have to be voted upon, that they've achieved tenure, it's just notification of the board?
Yes. That's accurate. They get it by right in terms of completing the period of time and the classes that they're going to take.
Thank you both.
Thank you all. Curriculum and programs, I see we have nothing this evening. Dr. Katona?
There is nothing for voting this evening. I did just want to make everyone aware of, Paul had mentioned previously about, in his report, about committee looking into the effectiveness of state tests and, how much they really predict success and so forth. And there was just something that came out that the Pennsylvania Senate voted unanimously on a bill to push back the Keystones again to 2021, and it's now going to the House. And so I had just spoken with someone from PDE last week regarding the 2020 deadline because of the project-based assessments. I was trying to get information, and I couldn't really get in. She was not sure, and she said that things are still up in the air. And then I just saw this weekend that vote had been taken by the Senate. So we'll see where it goes from here, and I'll keep everyone posted as I get information.
Thank you, Dr. Catone. I appreciate that update. Moving on to policy, we have 5 policies that are on for first reading this evening. Actually, 4 policies for our first reading, 1 for elimination. And then we have 3 policies plus the code of conduct for second reading. So can I have a motion to approve the second reading policies as presented here this evening? Ms. Hall, can I have a second? Ms. Cancro? Any comments from the board? Ms. Hall?
I'll comment on the sudden cardiac arrest one. I did want to clarify to the board that this, and I hope Mr. Dooley will correct me if I'm wrong, but this policy was created to support the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Prevention Act enactment of May 30th, 2012, and that is the reason for the policy. It is a requirement for athletes, and that is, it's for athletes and not for all students.
That is correct. That's the requirements of that act. Yes.
And I would think then, just like anything else, if the board wanted to explore developing a policy for other students, we could certainly bring that for discussion in the policy committee and see where it goes from there. But I appreciate the clarification, Ms. Hall and Mr. Dooley, about the origins of this policy and why we have it. So thank you. Are there any other comments from the board on this? Seeing none, can I have all those in favor of approving these policies and code of conduct as listed? The motion carries 8-0. Gifts and donations, Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. There are 9 gifts and donations listed, and just for further reference, while the ones that are listed on the agenda prior to comments on board action items, I read the following. Accept a donation of $2,859.60 from the Shenandoah Foundation to support the staffing for the new summer library program.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Can I have a motion to accept the gifts and donations as presented? Ms. Reese, and can I have a second? Mr. Navarrete. And any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion carries 8-0. We have nothing for trips. May I have a motion to approve the appointment of Elizabeth Drummond, Mary Hall, and Michael Ryan as voting delegates to the PSBA Delegate Assembly to be held on October 19th, 2018? Ms. Cancro, can I have a second? Ms. Reese. Any comments from the board? I appreciate these 3 individuals volunteering additional time beyond their duties as board members to be our voting delegates at the Delegate Assembly in October. So thank you. All those in favor of these items? The motion passes.
There is a document that I'm passing around so that we would have signatures for Mr. Ryan, Ms. Hall, Ms. Drummond, and Ms. Aubrey-Larsenis. It's for the certification of voting delegates. So please don't leave here this evening without signing this so that we can get this into PSBA tomorrow morning. Okay?
Yeah, and I'll warn you, if you don't sign something before you leave here, Mary Mandia will be on the phone first thing tomorrow morning hunting you down. I can tell you from experience. May I have a motion to approve the appointment of Danielle Penza to serve as treasurer to the Board of School Directors for a term of 1 year effective July 1st, 2018? Ms. Cancro, can I have a second? Ms. Reese, any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion carries 8-0. I'm going to do the school physician, school dentist, and football team physician all together, if that's okay with the board. So can I have a motion to approve item E, the appointment of Dr. Jeffrey C. Brand as school physician, item F, appointment of Dr. Sheldon Borochow as school dentist, and item G, appointment of Dr. Aman as team physician for the home football games. Okay, Ms. Reese, and a second, Mr. Navarette. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries 8-0. Dates for board members' calendars presented here. We've got some committee meetings happening this summer, which is nice to see. I know we don't always do that. Anything under old business this evening? Ms. Reese?
Not really business. I just wanted to acknowledge a few things that happened at last week's meeting. First, it was brought to the attention that it was bad. Some of us were not here, so I wanted to apologize for missing a meeting. It's very rare that any of us miss a meeting, but with full-time jobs and families, sometimes it happens, and we have to juggle as best we can. And I had faith in the budget, the $109 million budget, the months and months of hard work that went into it, and the Finance Committee. So I had to make a decision between this week and last week. So do apologize for missing it and appreciate all the hard work on the budget. It was also unusual for me to watch the meeting because I haven't done that in a long time. It's a different viewpoint sitting up here versus seeing on the camera. You actually even hear things differently because of the audio. And it felt a little contentious last week, and I wanted to just acknowledge that this board really appreciates all the public, whether it's negative comments or positive comments, and we fully respect and listen and always take notes and write down what you have to say. And it's not always easy to be a passionate member of the public or a passionate member of the board. And if we could all kind of take a step back. And we have been attacked at times by certain people, and it is difficult. It's not easy. And we are volunteers, and although we are elected, we do our best. So I just want to thank those members who come because we appreciate your insight, and I appreciate Mrs. Larseny's hard work. It's not easy to be in charge and to be faced with being called the timekeeper and things like that. So thank you to Mrs. Larseny for everything she does and the rest of you, and thank you to those who do question us and bring good insight.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. I appreciate that. Anything else for old business? New business. Mr. Ryan.
I just have two things for this evening. Neither one require any votes by the board, but I did want to, for at least one of them, get the kind of the overall board approval for, in conjunction with the passage of the state budget. They also set aside a $60 million school safety fund that's to be established in conjunction with the 2018-2019 state budget. The language set out lays out 22 specific uses for funds by individual school districts, and the emphasis is squarely on local control. Districts applying could use the grant fund to hire new security officers, working from the complete opposite end of the student services spectrum. They could pay for in-school mental health counselors. Long story short, this is fairly new developed information. It just came about, this was last Friday. But in terms of the $60 million, they do say that no school district will receive more than 10% of that, which would be $6 million. And every school district that has a valid application will receive at least $25,000. So if we did, the minimal here, we could submit something. So I'd like to task the administration, along hopefully with maybe the board president and vice president, to come back to the board with a recommendation for what they would like to see done. The warning here is that this is one-time funded money currently. This is for 1 year. So if we would do something for the $25,000 that would need to be recurring, the district would have to keep doing that without guarantee of the money. So I would like to just, if everybody could kind of keep that in mind versus, what one-time thing could we do? Do we have a larger plan in place? So I was hoping to get kind of the nod of the board here tonight and maybe a comment or two from the superintendent.
Yeah, well, I'll go first. We've been hearing that something like this would come about, and obviously there's a lot of concern, across the nation as well as in the legislature of our Commonwealth about making sure that we provide opportunities for all school districts to address matters of safety in ways that they feel are most appropriate. We're all not in, every district in the Commonwealth is at different places in this spectrum. And that's why you see in this final passage of this opportunity, providing so many flexible options. And part of actually what was happening from the IU, our superintendents, went to Harrisburg, similar to many of you who participated in going to Harrisburg and asking for funding. We too, made similar suggestions. I'm not saying that this is a result of ours specifically, but these are in line with what we were asking for, not just a one-shoe-fits-all pot of money to address issues. So with that, I know that Dr. Sinovic, being in charge of our district safety in the district, I know he's been working on trying to address the opportunity here, and I'll just turn the microphone over to him for just a second to kind of give you an idea where we're at.
Sure. So we have been having conversations about this for some time, although this hit the papers like in Friday, but we've been aware of this grant opportunity for a couple of weeks. We have discussed this among our cabinet. We've had conversations as a recent at our administrative retreat. We have meetings scheduled with our school safety coordinators, that support us through U.S. Security Care, Mr. John Gooley, to talk about what are appropriate programs that we should consider here that would be right for Methacton. And so we are doing that work now, and we look to put together a grant to take advantage of this opportunity.
I would just say we will be submitting a grant. I just can't tell you exactly what we're going to submit for, but we have to consider, as Mr. Ryan had pointed out, this is likely to be one-time money. So the last thing I want to do is set us up for a challenge unless we bring something for you to tell you how to fund that long term. But most importantly, some districts might use this to install security cameras. We have those things in place, but there's a lot of things that we have to consider. So we'll certainly come forward with that information to the board, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you both for your hard work on that. The only other thing that I did want to point out, which I failed to mention, is just that with the turnaround on this, it is a very quick turnaround, which I'm sure you're aware of, but they do want all applications being in by October 31st, 2019, and it does sound like that they will start approving them on the order that they're received. So I would imagine we would want to be proactive in getting this in front to, get whatever funds we may need. So, sorry, Mr. Navarrete.
No, thanks, Mike. That was actually going to be my next question, was when is it due? And then the second question is, and I know you and I have had a conversation about security too, is not just as a chair of property committee, but as someone that sends my entire life into our schools every day. This is paramount for me. So I would like to, maybe we're going to bring it back through property. We want to bring it back through some ad hoc committee, whether it's just grant. Certainly, I know we've talked about a larger security discussion. But let's talk about what the right, I think it might be worthwhile to have maybe some board input on what we're going to look at and apply for.
Sorry, one possible correction. Reading the information that I was given, it does say October 31st, 2019. I'm not sure if that should actually read 2018 or 19, but just to keep it in mind. Thank you.
I think it also dovetails in what Ms. Reese mentioned in the education meeting when we had a very good discussion around mental health and the possibility of taking some funding for a program that Dr. Angstad is looking into. I certainly see a good support mechanism for that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Can I get my second one?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I forgot you did say you did have two.
This one's quick. It's been brought up twice now by a member of the public with the PSBA and money being for advocacy. I did mention at that meeting to please provide me with whatever report or study that you had been reading from. I didn't receive anything. I did find there was an article from from the Commonwealth Foundation, which listed, broad information about what money they had received from Ithacton. So I wanted to reach out to Mr. Bricker to see what money we had paid from the school district to PSBA on a line-by-line item here. And the charges are for membership and policy maintenance, conferences for board members, conferences for administration, board members training, board president's panel, school director training, law handbooks, school finance books, spring legal roundup, board webinar. These are just, the various things over the last 3 years. If you average, it's about $15,000 a year. I believe the member of the public had said since 2010, give or take about 8 years, 15,000, about 120,000, somewhere in that range, 100,000. So the money that we were spending to PSBA is not being used or earmarked from the board standpoint of view for any liaison work, nothing in regards specifically to SB2. So I just want to make sure that was public knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I appreciate you doing the legwork on that. Also for new business, I have an item that I'd like to bring up for discussion. Last month, we had a special meeting immediately prior to, last week, we had a special meeting immediately prior to our work session. The month before that, May, we had a special meeting immediately prior to a work session. And in December of 2017, we had a special meeting immediately prior to a work session. This happens usually a few times a year. When that has happened, what we have done, at least in the last 3, in my time as president of this board, we've deferred courtesy of the floor from that special meeting to the later meeting. Now, last week, when I made a motion to attempt to do that, to put it frankly, it did not go well. The impression that I got from the board members in attendance at the meeting was that this was not the way that the board wanted to handle the courtesy of the floor during these special meetings. So I would ask that we have a discussion here about how we want to handle the courtesy of the floor portion of the meeting when we have these back-to-back meetings, when we have a brief special meeting preceding another meeting. And I'd love to hear board members' thoughts on that.
I would say if I was here, I would 100% agree with you. There's time to talk at board action items, and you can always email, come to committees, there's always time to talk. And I did sense the public's concern with that, and I don't think anyone could argue that we don't give the public opportunity to speak. And if we have seemed cautious, it is difficult to sit up here and have your family questioned, and your property taxes questioned, and your personal lives attacked. So if we have seemed guarded, that is why. And I thought it made perfect sense, and I apologize for not being here to say that to you. I personally thought it was fine. There's more than enough time to talk. The budget has been talked about for months. So that's my opinion.
I will also say that in speaking with the solicitor about this, we are offering ample time under the Sunshine Act for public comment and for courtesy of the floor. One possible solution is to amend the agenda when we publish the agenda for these special meetings so that we make it clear what our intentions are, because I think that may be part of the problem, is that it has the appearance of making a change when, in my mind, we're just maintaining consistency with what we've done in the past. So that would be another solution that I would propose, is that whatever the outcome of this is, that we make sure that the agendas that we publish accurately reflect what our intentions are for the meeting. Mr. Winters?
Yeah, I would say maybe for clarity yes, to get it right on the agenda, that it goes out for sure, but also maybe it's been suggested, and I know other districts that have done it, and Ithacton has done it in the past, where there's a brief approval of the agenda, so if there's going to be a change, it's known from the upfront, that you get the whole board on board of what that decision is going to be made. It takes 45 seconds to go through the approval of the agenda if we're going to, most of the time, so we can sort of stave off those mid-meeting crises. So I would recommend we put that in the process.
Paul, thank you for bringing that up, because even at other times, nothing to do with special meetings, there have been issues with the agenda at times, so that could be a quick solution. I forgot about that, and I know members of the public have brought that up as well.
Yeah, and on the subject from last week, I would just, if we have put on the agenda that we're going to have courtesies for, we should just go through the process, and if we're going to change it, we need to do it up front, or not have it on there and put on the back end of the second meeting or whatever. But we should be consistent with what we're going with the agenda.
I guess let me start with this. Just, Jack, can you explain what our obligations are as a board? I know certainly, having sat on the other side of this table and wanting to say my piece and have ample time to do it, it's critically important. But what is our obligation?
So the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act requires that the public be given an opportunity to speak at any meeting prior to the board taking action. The issue is to speak on what topics. So you need to give the public the opportunity to speak on any topics that may come before the board, not simply agenda items. That needs to be done at one point or another. So if you're going to limit public comment to only the beginning of the meeting, it cannot be limited to only action items, if that's going to be the only time for public comment. What you're doing here completely complies with the Sunshine Act, because it's action items only at the beginning, but then courtesy of the floor at the end. If, however, you wish to eliminate courtesy of the floor at the end, which is not required by the Sunshine Act, the public comment at the beginning would have to be expanded beyond simply the action items.
Okay. So I guess, thank you for the clarification then. I think having listened to this on the phone last week, and I guess I was unaware of how we had done this in the past, but I think, one of the comments made was that we were going to allow people to speak at one point, at one courtesy of the floor session, and not speak at the other, and I think that raises confusion, it raises questions, it's unnecessary, and then I think that was, at least listening in and then having watched it back, that to me that was where some of the issue was. So I'll follow Paul's suggestion and say that we just, when we have those short meetings like that, we would just eliminate the courtesy of the floor from the first meeting, and then we just roll it into the back end of the meeting.
I agree that for me, the confusion lay in what the agenda was saying versus then what was happening at the meeting. So I think just having that the same would help a lot, yeah.
I would concur that if our agenda would follow what our actions were, that would be helpful. I think my issue last week was with the thought that this states if there's not sufficient time at a meeting for residents to speak, it can be deferred to the next regular meeting or special meeting. And last week was strange. We had no presentations. It was a short meeting. So I felt we did have time to allow people to speak. And that is why I did not vote for the motion.
I appreciate that. My thought process was that we were following the same procedures that we had followed in previous meetings that had the same arrangement of being a special meeting before a work session. And also going off of the advice that I was receiving from the solicitor that evening. So it sounds like we have some consensus of how to move forward with this, and I appreciate everybody's input. I don't mean to cut everybody off from discussion here if anybody has anything else. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And at this point, then, we will open it up to courtesy of the floor. Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. First, I'd just like to say something to Mr. Ryan. I had mentioned him in the code of conduct, and if I had misquoted anything about your situation, about the public drunkenness. If I got that wrong, I apologize. For the record, that's what it was. If I got it wrong, I apologize. Your policy chair got it right. She knows the policy, you don't. She read it for you. If there's not sufficient time at a meeting for public comment, the comment period may be deferred to the next regular meeting or to a special meeting occurring before the next regular meeting. It has nothing to do with what you think and how you feel and whether somebody feels they're being attacked. It's your board policy. So you can sit there and get a consensus all you want. You have a board policy that says what you have to do. So at the end of that last 50-minute meeting, you had no reason and no justification to get rid of courtesy of the floor because there was no time constraint. It was a 50-minute meeting. So you violated your board policy. You also violated the Sunshine Law. Pure and simple. So if you want to go ahead and do these gyrations, you're violating your own board policy. Why don't you ask your solicitor? That's why I keep saying, what happens to you guys when you violate board policy? Fortunately, you have your policy committee chair up here who knows your board policy, and she just told you you can't do what you want to do because you're violating board policy 903. So you can't just go say, we're going to put out an agenda for next month that says we're not having courtesy of the floor. You have to make that decision at the time of your meeting. So if your first meeting goes 3 hours and you don't have time, that's when you make your decision. You don't make it a month in advance. You know, just because you were embarrassed because your board knew better than you did doesn't mean you can come back here and act like you're acting. Because your second meeting was an hour. So you had time for both courtesies of the floor. I don't know what you're doing. You know, swallow your pride, bury your ego, and run things the way they're supposed to run. You guys hate public comment. You hate people who disagree with you. You hate it. Ms. Rees hates it. I don't get it. Makes no sense to me. Why can't you follow your board policy? Don't you understand it? You don't like being called the timekeeper? Do you not understand the board policy? She does. She gets it. Your policy committee chair gets it. What grades are involved in the Arcola Auditorium?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
What grades go into the auditorium? 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th?
I believe the auditorium is used by students throughout the district, all grades.
What, high school people, everybody?
Yes.
I just looked at the people who've got resigned and the people you hired. Like there were 5 people who resigned and you guys hired 7. Is that right? What about staff reductions? Why don't you guys want to reduce staff? Because my review shows that K-4 is fine. Your 9 to 12 is fine.
Dr. Malik, please wrap up.
Sure. Where you have a staff situation is the 5 to 8 zone. And I ask myself, where do you guys all have your kids?
Dr. Malik, you're over the 4-minute mark.
Where are the kids? Why don't you want to touch the 5 to 8 zone? That's my question.
Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Ms. Hollabach.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. Mr. Ryan, I couldn't hardly hear half of what you said. You got to lean in and speak into the microphone so I can hear you. Were you referring to the $125,000 I've been asking about that's being used for lobbying?
I am referring to the $125,000 which is not being used for lobbying.
Okay. So in other words, the Commonwealth Foundation got all the school districts wrong?
and I won't go into a back and forth, no celebrity larcenies, but this has been brought up on multiple occasions, so I want to make sure that the record is set straight with what the school district is actually doing. I read to you the entire amount that our school district has paid to PSBA for all of those items listed before. There is no money being sent from our district to PSBA, which is earmarked for lobbying. That was the point I was trying to make. So the money that they had put out there, the $120-some thousand, was the amount that Methacton paid to PSBA. Now, you can infer whatever you want from the money that PSBA receives, but no money was earmarked from Methacton for the specific purpose of lobbying.
So what you're saying is, once the money leaves here and goes there, you have no control over what they use it for. I mean, that would be 500 school districts telling them what to do with the money, which I don't think is feasible. But what you're saying, because I couldn't hear half of what you said, I'm sorry, I'm deaf in one ear, but I don't think any foundation is going to put the information out there if it's not true. Now, what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is once Methacton sends the money into them, you have no control or say how they disperse the money. You just pay them, and then what happens at that end you have no control over it as the school board. I mean, that's what I'm getting from you, that once they receive any monies from Methacton, you have no control over it. Do they have to tell you how they're spending it? That's what I mean. They don't have to, so that's understandable. I would like to see the line item, and Mr. Bricker does it, because you're still sending taxpayer money to the PSBA. And that's the taxpayers' money. But I appreciate you looking into it. I really do. A comment was made about respect. Mrs. Larceny, I was raised by my parents that respect is a two-way street. I haven't seen any respect towards me from this board. I have been called names. I have been treated badly. I have been sitting in front of a school board for 12 years. I've never, ever been treated that way. And trust me, I went toe-to-toe with previous boards, especially when I spoke out against the millions of dollars they were spending, and we're still on the hook for it. But you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like what I say. But before 2015, I didn't see monies at school board meetings. Many nights, John Andrews and I were the only two people sitting here. So I have a little bit of knowledge and history of this school district. And when I get up and say something to you, I'm not saying it off the top of my head. I do my research. I look into things. A lot of times I look into things what the school board should be doing. But to be treated that way and called names, I'm not going to tolerate it. The only people in my life I had to respect was my parents. Everybody else has to earn my respect. That's the way it works. That's what I was taught by my father, and he was a very smart man. I will respect you if you respect me. It's that simple. But to say that we're purposely disrespectful, no. And as far as courtesy of the floor, that's what started it. The only time that has ever been done in previous years was they ended the school board meeting because of the snow. And they were going to hold courtesy of floor over to the next week. And they didn't do it, and Mr. Andrews called them on it. Other than that, it was never done. But if you have a problem with courtesy of the floor, take it off the agenda. And you don't have to hear from anybody in the public.
Thank you, Ms. Alabak. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Ms. Kaplan.
You got to carry it. I don't need no exercise.
Sharon Kaplan, Lower Providence, and Skyview teacher. So my question really is, as an employee, 2 years ago, the school board changed the policy for transportation for trips, where we have to go through first student first now. So I'm not sure if that was part of the contract that we had with First Student, or if that was just a change in policy. So as somebody who organizes trips, since that policy has changed, I've had problems with transportation. So if somebody could just email me, let me know if it is part of the contract, because I guess then we're kind of stuck with that, or if not, which committee meeting I should go to talk about that.
Yeah, hey, Sharon. So this came up with transportation, and I'd heard from a number of teachers about the problems with field trip, and everybody's aware of the transportation issues that we had. It's part of the reason I wanted to be front and center, part of the Property and Transportation Committee. So that's where we discussed it. It came up after, I would say, what was a pretty, for this district, high-profile miss with a jazz band trip.
Right.
Which I think there was, Liz's daughter was affected by it up here too. So we brought up the issue to the school board that can we one, fix the process, and then as I learned more about the process, and it's a paper process now, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of confirmation steps back and forth. I know Mr. Bricker took some steps to immediately amend the process so that there should be some communication back and forth, and then at the last Transportation or Property and Transportation Committee meeting earlier this month, the last update that I got was that they were looking into how we can do that electronically so that there is some form of confirmation that's automatic, or even a place where you can go and check and confirm that your trip is booked.
The problem more is with the follow-through on the buses. Actually, it's not with the confirmation. I mean, I get confirmation for my trip back in October for a Memorial Day.
But you want to know in May, right? But you want to know in May, right?
So the problem actually is with the follow-through and the buses showing up on time, not a half hour late. We've never had a problem before when we were allowed to use outside resources, and now since we've had to go through the district to use it, both years we've had major problems. I mean, we were late to the game this year, and last year we had them calling us while we were at the game, telling us we had to come back a half hour early because they gave us high school buses. So
I remember. I was a chaperone on that trip, yeah.
So I think we need to look at the policy, and it's odd to me that in previous years they told us they couldn't provide us with that many buses at that time because of after-school sports, and now all of a sudden they can, and it hasn't worked so well. So if there can be a review of that or anything, that would...
Understood. I will take that back to the committee, and Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Bricker, we can talk about that then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaplan. Mr. Bickelman.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. Regarding the bid that was approved for Mascaro, I would think that Mr. Fry's opinion was put in black and white and sent to the superintendent, and the superintendent distributed that opinion, that letter, with the details to the board to give the board peace of mind in considering that issue. I still don't know what was missing from the waste management bid. Was it were they dump or recycling, things like that? I still don't know what it was, and I'd like to know what it was. What was missing? Nobody knows? I mean, it's just something I would like to know. I would like to know why waste management was rejected. I guess I'll call Mr. Whistler at the IU. The other thing with the resignation of Mr. Ganesh, he comes forward to the superintendent and says, I'm going to resign. And I would say, as superintendent, I probably would say, let's brainstorm with Mr. Sosnovic and see what the critical issues are and what kind of time limit we have. And when do you start your new job? And I would consider all that, and I would put a date in this saying that Mr. Ganesh is done with the school district on such and such date. You know, and maybe he can't take care of all the critical issues. Maybe he has to start his job on such and such date. okay? I would like to know when he's going to stop getting paid with taxpayer dollars here, and when do we find that out as a public? When do we find out when Mr. Ganesh stops getting paid in the district? Is it going to be public? It has to be public. But the critical item should have been brainstormed and says, yeah, we need to have you around for 3 weeks if you can swing that, Mr. Ganesh. You know, and we need to have you here. When are you going to start your new job? Well, I'm going to start at August 31st. There needs to be a date, you know. Needs to be a date. I hope we find out, because it has to be in the board minutes too, when an auditor or somebody might tie in his salary based on a date. Payroll needs to know when to stop paying him. I just don't understand why there's no resignation date for somebody leaving. So hopefully we find out. What happens, Mrs. Larsenes, when we ask questions, I would hope you or somebody on the board would ask the taxpayer-paid administrators, who are very knowledgeable in the fields and different departments that they do. Mr. Sosnovic does a great job, Mr. Bricker does a great job, and have them answer the simple questions. When things start to become contentious is when a simple question gets asked up here and it doesn't get answered by an administrator who has the answer in their back pocket. That creates a feeling of, you don't want us to know what the answer is. You don't want us to know why the $120,000 change in special ed changed from the last public presentation of the budget. I mean, you'd want to know. That's all. Just call on the administrators who are paid taxpayer dollars to do their jobs, and they do it well, to answer the questions. As far as the compensated leave for that 5th grade teacher, I don't know how many districts in Montgomery County have compensated leaves in their bargaining agreement. I don't know. But I know teachers earn sabbaticals to go on professional development. I just got from some comments, does anybody on the board know what she's going to do? Anybody? Does anybody on the board know what that teacher is going to do that you approved? Because she can earn a sabbatical. I mean, do you know? It seems like you don't know where she's going. You'd be surprised what I've found out that teachers did with sabbaticals in my history where I worked. But the board should know. I mean, you should question that. You should question the superintendent. Emails or whatever, what is she going to do? Is it worth the district's payment of her salary? What's she bringing back as an asset?
Thank you. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I had thought that the no confidence vote at the end of the last meeting about adjourning when a member of the public wanted to speak at courtesy of the floor would have settled the issue, but apparently not. Now, earlier at the beginning of this fiscal year, I had a discussion with the board president before she became board president, relative to following Policy 903 when she was the head of the policy committee. And the issue was the policy at that time called for a board vote on the agenda at the start of the meeting. And that's done in a number of other Montgomery County school districts. And the policy wording was that the board shall vote on the agenda. And she said, well, that's a matter of opinion, which didn't satisfy me. And I think that members of the public, when they come to the podium at courtesy of the floor, they try to be compact in their presentation. They're not running out the clock. We now have a 4-minute courtesy of the floor time limit. It used to be 3. Before that, it was 2. And when it was 2 minutes, we didn't even have committees except for a finance committee. The adjacent school districts, Upper Merion, Norristown, North Penn, Springford, none of them have time limits. So that's a counter to people saying, well, the majority of districts in the county have 3 to 5 minutes. Each district is different, but here I do sense that the public deserves more respect. The public brings items to the board that they feel are worthwhile, and that should be respected. The other problem with the meetings policy is that it sets the 4-minute limit also on action items, and as members of the public have discussed, sometimes there's dozens of action items, and they can't all be addressed in 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes. So I think if the board can improve that policy, it will be respectful of the public and respectful of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Hull, and a second. Ms. Drummond. Meeting is adjourned.